So we're going to get started here. Scott Park is in this session, and so if you're wanting to hear from Scott Park, you're in the right place. If you want to hear from somebody else, maybe they'll be on later. Or who's our other session right now? Help me out, Kim. John Buck downstairs. So anyway, so Scott talked a little bit yesterday, and I'm cheating off the slide here. Normal California farmed abnormally. I thought that was pretty catchy. But looking forward to him following up more on what he does and his practices right here in the Central Valley. Scott?
I'm bringing up a cheat sheet today. Hopefully I don't have to reach for it. I thought this was going to be, maybe I would be safe and have a podium in front of me that I could steal thoughts from, but no, I've got to be in this situation again. But it should be okay, and I really would want to have a lot of back and forth, okay? So if you don't think I developed any thought well, or even preferably you think I'm out to lunch, you know, let's throw it back and forth, because this is why we're doing it today and getting together and going over these things. So yeah, yesterday I gave that normal crop on farmed abnormally, which I think in the California scenario, our farm is different. But today it's kind of like some of this was, so I didn't screw up my two slides. I had to get, hey, now I feel at home. They're a little better. In fact, if I stand behind it, now I've covered all bases. No, this mostly the second name was just as I'm putting together my PowerPoint that I wouldn't get the two crossed, because these are two different slides, although I steal a little from the first day. So growing crops, California crops regeneratively. I honestly feel that I'm not sure I deserve the regenerative claim. Definitely our farm's getting better. As I touched on the results yesterday, we're getting really good things, but we also feel that we've got a really long way to go. I do think in ag and talking on farming, the term sustainable seems to be sliding down and regeneratives up, and I totally agree with that, because I don't think farming, at least in California, I don't see enough in the rest of the United States, is sustainable is not good enough. We don't want to be sustaining what we're doing. We need to do better. And by doing better, we need to be impacting all aspects while we're making money as farmers. And that's the crux of what I was saying yesterday, and the crux that I'm going to hit on today is there shouldn't be a separation between soil health and regenerative farming and money in your back pocket. That so much of it's treating, and I do stuff with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and they're apologetic for encouraging cover crops. And in fact, I spoke up in one of their Soil Summit meetings, and I said, you're doing the farmers a favor. In the long run, they're going to be way better off financially if they're thinking of building up the soil and letting the soil do all the work for them, letting the soil limit and flip the risk. Flip the risk to the people that depend on a sterile environment, having to put all their inputs in, instead of just trusting your soil and the overall environment in your field to take care of your crops. As I commented to you, that we're putting on next to nothing, growing a lot of high value crops with a lot of animals, insects, and diseases that I'll run across today that other farmers are fighting, that for the most part has just disappeared. And one of the things I'm proud of is I was talking to a group on cover crops a couple weeks ago, and my PCA was at the meeting, and I didn't recognize him. Okay, so that's where you want to get. And I have to have a PCA, because there are something like there's a whitener or a kaolin product, which was just white clay kaolin, and we have put that on for like darkened ground beans. You have to go through a PCA to get it through a company. So I do keep my pest permits. I'm not blind on it, but yeah, as far as depending on the PCA for the decision making and what we do on the farm, we've pretty much evolved from that. So which one did I go? That went too far. Can we go back? How am I missing my favorite slide? Oh, that's my favorite slide. Okay, so here's where we're going to go. And from my perspective, if we never get past soil health practices, that's fine. But I'm going to go through, and however the questions flow, or if you all you're interested in getting down to the bottom there, other factors influencing. This is more one farmer's take on why we're not getting anywhere. Why, we're moving forward, but we're moving forward way, way slower than we should be moving. And so that's, the way I see it, I'm putting it into three groups of knowledge, what's being passed to the farmer, the economics, as the farmer looks at it, residue management's a big deal, but there's other factors that we're not moving forward on farming more thoughtfully, and the psychological, or another way of putting that, is your mindset. And I think in each one of those phases, there's reasons, and maybe some of you are here, I'll answer some of those questions, or probably I'll just create more questions. But either way, that's the intent. So I'll just touch quickly again on how we got into farming, and then yesterday I touched on the 7 C's. Okay, so we'll go through each one of those C's, and I'll develop that a little more. Then I'll give you an example of how we're applying the 7 C's on one crop. Rice is the best example because we grow rice. I'm pretty safe in saying, I don't know every rice grower in California, but I don't think there's anyone in California that grows rice the way we grow rice. And there's a specific reason why we grow rice the way we do, and it solves all the problems for the most part, and we get better crops, use less water, and the quality is really good. And then I put together a talk for, actually it was amazing, for PCA's continuing education. What is it, CEU, continue, or whatever. Yeah, so you need to get credits to keep your PCA license. I'm a CCA, and so I go to them also, and for some reason my name must have come up in the wrong slot because they had me come speak to a group of PCAs. And one of the PCAs is a good friend of mine, and I just said to him, I just want you to know that this talk I'm giving is telling how to eliminate your business. So, and as it is, after the talk, and the people that put it on, as I walked by them, as I left, there was complete silence. There was like, oh shit, what did we just do? Okay, so anyway, and then whatever, tower time flows. So, but don't feel, that we have to go rushing through all this stuff. So this I touched on yesterday, but again, this is the crux. This is everything that I'm getting at. This is where we were. This is still what's going on, and this is what we're trying to do, or what we are doing, and getting away from the Brown psychology. Really, Brown is good. And I'm just referencing Northern California, where I'm farming, but I think it's prevalent because been on boards and dealt with other farmers throughout the state, and it's a prevalent line of thinking, that it's much safer to put all the inputs in yourself than trusting the nature to provide your inputs. And we're trusting nature. So yeah, this is one. This is how I used to farm. And we would inundate from 1974 through 1985. We were as good at using chemicals as any farmer in California. I was so good at it that actually PCAs had come and asked me for rates and gallonages of what to put on different pre-emergent herbicides and what have you in tomatoes. We bombed seriously. But I saw that was a bad deal. So this one is kind of feel good, but it's still a great picture, and I just like the contrast. This is right in front of our house. And my wife, yes, it's the way I want her always to have her apron on, just working her butt off for me in the kitchen, Actually, this was Christmas Day. Ula was cooking dinner, and we just had a front come through, and the rainbows hit, and our grandkids are at the house. So it all fell in place really, really well. Okay. So, yeah, I went through a lot of this yesterday, so you can look at it if you've got any questions. But, yeah, I had no idea. One good example of how little I knew the first year I started farming I came down, I told you yesterday about the 20% and the peanut butter sandwiches. So that year, just as an example of what an idiot I was, I actually called my PCA in a panic that we had planted tomatoes and they'd gotten up about 6 inches. I called him in a panic and said, I got worms all around my roots. Can you come and check the field? And he comes and checks the field. And he goes, Scott, do you know what those are? And I'm going, I've seen them fishing. And he's going, yeah, those are earthworms. He goes, you want those? I said, really? I mean, that's how little connection I had with the soil and what I was doing. As it is now, we do in the spring, for the most part, I go on Earthworm Patrol before we're planting in the spring, it kind of tells me if we dig and the earthworms are all over the place, then we're positioned pretty good and that ground's ready to roll. That in green is what we're trying to do, is to build the soil with life diversity and reduce disturbance. That's the crux of it. But that practice with minimalism and cutting down all these inputs, this is where we want to solve the problems before they happen. And it's almost, Gabe gave the example yesterday of going through 4 years of major hardships, and he looks back on it and he's going, that's the best thing that ever happened. I've also got my slew of hardships to go through too, but I won't pepper you with them today. But this solving the problems before they happen, probably the best thing that happened to me in my farming psychology is having to use organic insecticides and fungicides as I was taking on and farming organic and not understanding the value of the soil. Because we'd put the stuff on, and I'm not knocking any products now because I haven't put on, to speak of, any products for the last 10 years. Okay, and I know there's been a lot of good advances in insecticides and fungicides on the biological side. So I'm not knocking them. I'm going back into the late, actually early 1990s, where you'd put it on and have absolutely zero impact, and you just go, I just spent a lot of money on a jug of glorified water, and time and again, when you come out from conventional to organic, you have this mindset. This is the way you still solve problems. The only difference is you put on an organic supposable bug killer instead of a synthetic bug killer. But the difference is the synthetic one really does kill, and the organic one really doesn't kill because it's natural and they hadn't come out with the processes yet. So we'd go and put it on and get zero results and lose a crop to aphid, or lose, like in 1999, we lost a crop, and I have money now. I'm not saying I have a lot, but I'm okay. But back in the 90s, I didn't have money, and we lose a 100-acre field of tomatoes 100%. And we were doing the Apocalypse Now picture of spraying everything we possibly could put on that field that was legal and having no impact. It's like having, another example, we used to have bird alarms back in the 70s on keeping hornlarks out of our tomato seedlings. It just made me think of it. But I find it humorous that we have this that's supposed to be sounding like a hawk, and it's supposed to keep the hornlarks out of the field. You got to go replace the battery every day. And you go and you replace the battery and you look on top of the alarm or the buzzer and there's all this bird poop. This isn't working. It was sort of the same thing as what we were going through when we were starting, okay? So all the positive effects, and in the university, I do a lot of stuff with UCD, as I've said, and a lot of this stuff is peripheral. To evaluate, yield has been commented a lot of, sort of where agriculture is, and even UCD throws a lot of yield questions at me. But that's not the big deal. That's not the big deal on the soil health thing. It's all the peripheral advantages. It's you irrigate once or twice less. Your tillage is less. Your equipment, the amount of energy you're using, you don't need to go rip the ground as much. Your quality's better. You keep your contracts. Erosion isn't even a consideration. Two big ones that don't quantify is the early planting combined with the early harvest. Okay, on our farm, we found it super critical that we are not on the late end of our both planting and our harvesting. That all the problems, because every crop has its season, right? So I'll just use tomatoes as an example. Like, we want to be in planting and done by the middle of April. We want to be in and done harvesting by the 20th of August. And it's just all the cycles of disease and insects come at the later part for whichever crop we're doing, be it rice, be it melons, beans, anything along the line. We make a point to be on the earlier side. So one of the, what was the term that, this is why I have to have my cheat sheet. Daphne's unintended consequences, she said today. Okay, I've been saying that for the last few years as I talk about our farm, but I've been calling it serendipitous. Unexpected, fortunate discoveries by accident, okay? Unintended consequences. And this is one of the unintended consequences that we had, that we found that the healthier the soil gets, the easier it is to get on the ground earlier. The easier you get on the ground earlier, you're planting, the ground's warm, it crumbles, your stand comes faster, your germination's good, you're harvesting earlier, the wave of insect and disease problems aren't quite hitting when your crop's already made and starting downhill to maturity and you're over the hump. And so, like, every crop we have benefits from being on the early side, and the reason we're on the early side is because our ground's a sponge. And I can't quite understand or explain it, how it is that your ground holds water better and yet you can get on it earlier. You think it holds water, it's going to be too wet, but it doesn't work that way. Okay, any questions, anything yet that doesn't, or I'm just rambling? So this is what I ran through quickly yesterday on the 7 C's, and these are the advantages that we have found over time, or why we do it. I mentioned yesterday we have 10 to 15 tons of biomass one way or another, and this is all above ground, below ground. We're also getting a lot of biomass. I think we can get a lot more if we do a lot more multi-species planting. Just as a story on the multi-species planting and the way our cover crops are being planted, we give a heavier emphasis on legumes, and this is a practical, this came over time. I was planting a lot more multi-species earlier, back in 2002 through 2006. And we had a really bad experience in 2006, and it's a good heads up because it can happen. That we planted a triticale, vetch, pea, bean, bell bean mix. 2006 was super, super wet. So normally we'd go in and work that cover crop. If we're going to plant like April 1st, we want to be working that cover crop, mixing it in say the 10th of March. We want to give it about 3 weeks for the soil to digest and break it down if possible. Well, it stayed wet, and it stayed wet, and it stayed wet. So instead of us doing that in March, we're coming in the end of April, first week of May, working in this cover crop. Okay, well, the triticale was 7 feet tall. I'm not exaggerating. And the bell beans were even higher than that. But the bell beans weren't the problem. The peas weren't the problem. The vetch wasn't the problem. The triticale was a major problem. And not only was it a major problem, but it had so long to grow, the root balls were like softballs. Okay, I mean, every root ball of the triticale was like this. So every operation we had through that whole season of cultivation all the way through harvest, it's hard to explain, but even in harvest, we have a tomato harvester with electronic eyes, and they knock out the greens, and the tomatoes head along, okay, and here's your flappers, and here comes a green tomato, whap, it knocks it on the ground, your red tomatoes kept going by. Well, we had so many root balls of triticale coming that it's coming along the belt, here's the whappers, and they wouldn't fit through the hole. They wouldn't drop through that gap. So we had to have people standing in front of both electronic harvesters, sorting as fast as they can. Not dirt, not moldy tomatoes, triticale root balls. And it's like you're going, I really don't want to be in this situation again. So it spooked us away from having grasses growing. But grasses, I have no doubt, are the way to go. It's just whether you can, and one response to that would be, well, don't till your ground. And if you don't till your ground, then you're not pulling up root balls and you don't have the problem. Okay, but so I'm not smart enough yet. I haven't figured out how to do that, especially in tomatoes. But that would be the easiest and quickest fix. But we're not there. So so we are anyway going to grow more multi-species, interplanting in any crop that we can that we're not cutting at ground level. It's another reason that we experience the limitations on doing no-till. Like tomatoes, the header of the tomatoes is cutting it an inch into the soil. I mean, it's below the soil. Okay, we're harvesting up to 50 tons of tomatoes an hour. You know, I mean, that harvester is moving fast, it's cutting, it's rolling, you know, we're spitting out 25-ton loads every half an hour or even faster, you know, in a good crop. But the end result, what you'll see, is there's nothing left. So I get a lot of questions, why don't you farm no-till? And that's one reason. We just cleaned the slate. Now we got to start again. Then we grow rice, and it's underwater for 3 or 4 months. And everything there's nothing there except for rice, right? So we don't have any biomass. We don't have any live roots, only the live roots during the time. But when we're done, the house has been cleaned. Growing dry beans, you know, black turtles, dark red kidneys, same thing, cutting an inch under the ground. We grow seed crops, squash, watermelon, cutting. Right on ground level. So how do you keep the system going of having as much life as possible in the soil when you have this type of farming practices? And you could say, well, don't grow tomatoes. Well, you know, tomatoes are really good to our farm. Tomatoes is the foundation. And just a side note, you know, I talked and touched on yesterday of crop rotation. Every crop loves following tomatoes. You know, so I mean, I have other people tell me, like they think in wheat that they'll pick up 1,000 pounds to the acre just going like from tomatoes to wheat, and we agree. And so it's super integral to our pocketbook, and it's super integral to our crop pattern of the way we go. So, and that's on crop rotation where I hit on there, and I'm referencing that this is a big deal. That's, you know, I give a lot of credit to soil health, which it deserves. But it's also the mix and timing, you know, like we're planting some stuff in the spring, and then we're planting in the winter, and then we're planting in the fall, and then we're planting in the summer. And we're not following any pattern. We're not letting diseases set up camp, and we're not letting insects or nematodes, like we've seen nematodes in fields that have completely gone. And we've done nothing intentionally. It's one of those unintended consequences where we plant tomatoes and we're going, hey, there's no more nematodes. It used to be a huge problem in this field. Same things happened with corky root that we had, the field that I showed with my wife. That field used to have super bad corky root. And then one year we're growing tomatoes and we're going, whoa, no more corky root. You know, it's just the system's cleaning house. I don't understand all the aspects of the fungi, bacterial. You know, I'm not at that level. But a lot of it is just observation, your 5 senses. You know, is a really big deal for park farming as we see the benefits that we're achieving. Crop residue, same thing, keeping a mix, keeping stuff that you're putting in the ground. Don't just grow vegetables or something that isn't breaking the cycle. Like we'll grow wheat, like that, the picture there with Ula, that's a wheat field. We don't make any money on that. I mean, you know, maybe we make $100. You know, we're growing other crops that some of them we can make up to $2,000 an acre. Or excuse me, yeah, $2,000 an acre. And this one, wheat, maybe we're making $100, maybe we lose $100. But it sort of fits, as I'll hit on it, is the long-term view of what you're trying to accomplish versus instant gratification. Okay, so like, yeah, the wheat's no great deal, but over 5 years, our farm's much better off having wheat in the mix, that shake up, that change, than just, you know, like we have, especially a few years back, but even this year, like our tomato cannery was saying, we want as many tomatoes as you'll give us. Okay, so like, you know, 1,700 acres, basically, we could say, yeah, we want to grow 85,000 tons for you. And they'd say, fine. You know, but we're not doing the ranch any good in the long run. Yeah, we make a good hit this year, but then we pay for it and give it back. It's sort of the same thing for our farm on double cropping. double cropping, we can get in a second crop and we can really, make more money. Well, what happens is, you did better that double, which is like going from wheat to growing, let's say, dark red kidneys. That's good. You made more money that year. But as I just emphasized on the early planting, now your ground's not ready for the next year. You're getting that crop off in November or something like that. And you can't do what you want to prep it. You can't get your cover crop in or what have you. So the money you just made pigging out one year, you just give back by a lousy crop the next year. So you find that balance. What I like to think that our farm purrs, but a lot of times it's hiccuping and belching. But the whole idea is to just try and look at that whole package all the time. What you're doing, what's the overall benefit through time, not the quick fix, not the instant money maker. So controlled traffic is just sensible, keeping the compaction to a limitation. Compost, there's a great picture that I'll show. And do we have a goal, as Rod was asking? Like, our goal is to get to the point where eventually we don't want to put in, it's okay to put on compost, but if we succeed, our farm will be self-sufficient, something not to the level that Gabe's at, but where every once in a while we need to tweak, like corn is super, we get really good yields of corn. We can have yields up to 6.7 tons per acre, which organically is like really high. And conventional good yields are 7 tons. So we're doing well on corn, but corn draws nitrogen really hard. And so we go on the safe side and we put more compost on. But eventually, if we succeed, we will eliminate compost from our farm. And also, it's like really expensive. We don't have any compost. We spend years, we can spend up to $400,000 a year on compost. So if that's eliminated, that's pretty good. Again, how do you make, it's not your yield, it's are you making a profit? And how are you making it? And the other side of it, how much risk do you have? All those are the factors. It's not just yield. And finally, the minimalism is what our farm is doing and wants to even get more as we cut down our nitrogen, as our ground gets better. We need less water. We're making concerted effort to get better on not disturbing the soil, and we don't need as many plants. And some of this minimalism, back when I was first starting farming back in the 70s, I had this guy who actually invented the square round processing tomato, okay? And he worked for Peto Seeds at the time. And Peto Seeds now, that name of that company's probably changed 20 times. But he was a doctor at University of California, Davis. And we developed a really good relationship, and he'd come out to my farm and look at what I'm doing. And at one point, he just oozed wisdom. And at one point he goes, Scott, and he's looking at what I'm doing, and he's going, almost all farmers use too much nitrogen, have too many plants, and use too much water. That you just don't need to do that. And that always stuck because it was such a contrast to everything I was hearing as being a farmer. It's just jam it, if a little water's good, more is better. If a little nitrogen's good, a lot more is better, right on down the line. And so we've taken this to heart, and we're seeing really positive results from it. And then the last one, which is, I think, is just guilty of all of mostly on the academic side, is that all we ever hear is NPK. And the respect for the biological, the respect for the physical, soil samples, NPK. You're a good farmer, here's your pH, here's your NPK, your carbon, magnesium can be improved a little, but there's nothing referencing what drives the whole system, what makes NPK available, mainly the biological. And anybody with any brains could out-argue me on it, but I say, if you know your biological and it's working right for you, the physical and the chemical fall in place. It's not the chemical puts the physical and the biological in place. I see it as the other. And so most soil samples now don't even have biological. So how are farmers making decisions? How do you know you're doing the right thing? Cover crops. So I've hit on some of this pretty hard. I don't think I need to go through it. We are heavy legume, and we're also finding, because we've been heavy legume, because of my 2006 triticale experience, that it's so much easier to work this into the ground and plant right away than it is if you have a bunch of grasses. And especially if you're in late, it just gets tougher, it's fibrous, it tangles on your equipment. And so people ask me, well, okay, I want to start growing cover crops, what I should grow, and so I put all these multi-species in, and I'm not being very good about the multi-species in this case, but I would still suggest that you start with a legume if you're actually going to be getting after cover crops. And the reason is it's really user-friendly. It breaks down really easy. As I'm going to touch on in the economic side, I think one of the main reasons that California farmers aren't doing many cover crops is because of residue management, okay? When you've got that nice, square, brown bed, and all you got to do is go in and scratch and put your herbicide in, drill your seed in, turn on your drip system, or put your spray, you're done. It's easy, it's manageable, and you can do it 1,000 miles away, okay? When you start putting all this biomass in the ground, like for ourselves, we time it that, like, we'll plant the tomatoes. Yesterday I hit on that 45 days without water. We time it that we put all this biomass under and we roll it, and then the soil structure is good enough that it's holding and it's breaking down these legumes, but we don't need to go in and put moisture. We don't need to add moisture to plant. That ground will hold the moisture. We can go stick a transplant in, or we can go in and stick a corn seed in the ground 2 weeks later and still not turn water in for 30 days, even after putting all this biomass in. If this was a grass, it wouldn't be as easy. All your timing, your margin of error would be shrinking a lot on you being able to time and pull this off. Okay, so if somebody's going, I want to get in to cover crops, I would still say initially go legumes. And I think Gabe could develop that thought more. We were talking about a little bit, and he was saying, yeah, when you start out, the legumes are easier to work with than the grasses and all the roots and what have you. And your CN ratios are not ready to get, if you put a bunch of, and this now I'm really going into areas I don't know, maybe you think I've already been there, but when you start on this, the CN ratio is really a big deal. The more grasses you put in is more carbon, okay? And you need nitrogen. The microbes are doing this dance between carbon and nitrogen. And if you overload on one side, which is more the grasses, you're going to have even more problems of having the nitrogen available when you have the plant in the ground. For whatever reasons, the microbial world takes care of the biomass and before they take care of feeding the roots. So this was out yesterday. This is going to have value only in a comparison on the conservation tillage. One of the parts of the conservation tillage is that we try to till to fit the crop. What was the crop? What will be the crop? So in here, because we need furrows, this is rice going into tomatoes. Rice, the field's flat. We got to make beds for tomatoes. So we go in and we make furrows to go. And any chance we have for us to go through in Northern California weather, everything we can have on beds, we want on beds. Everything, it's just better drainage, and you can get it on the ground earlier, so you get in that early harvest sequence. This is that picture that I just showed. This is what it looked like 3 weeks later. You can see here that these are rows of vetch coming, and on this one I feel very comfortable about the CN ratio and the grass legume and the multi-species thing, because nothing sucks nutrients out of the ground better than rice. Okay, rice just takes it all. I mean, it is the scavenger of all scavengers. So and it's one of the reasons why rice growers in California grow rice after rice after rice after rice after rice. And it's because the next crop that's grown, the ground is so stripped of all nutrients that like say if you wanted to come in and plant corn, like we'll never follow rice with corn. We'll never follow rice with wheat. The nutrients, they simply won't become available. We can do tomatoes, but it's the same thing. If we're doing it, we've got to get the rice crop off early and to get the straw, the whole system breaking down and revved up by next spring so that the rice straw is not holding up the availability of nutrients for the tomatoes. But it's still risky. We only do this, we try to not go rice to tomatoes. So here's controlled traffic. So by controlled traffic, we're running all our tractors. We've got quite a few of them. They're all on GPS RTK sub 1 inch. Okay, so he's running in the exact same furrows within an inch of where almost all the tractors have run in the last 10 years. Okay, every operation, every crop we grow, maybe we can make a little more money if we went to 5-bed, or where everything's on 60 inches. Maybe if we did some at 40 and some at 80 for a particular crop, we could make more money. It's just the uniformity and the simplicity of the business that we never have to change anything, and that all our compaction, if we got to go chase, which I'll show you a tomato picture here in a second, we know where the compaction is. And so we can shrink our tillage to fit the problem area and keep the tillage away from that which doesn't need tillage. Yeah.
What kind of work are you going to do to prep for your next crop?
Okay.
Is that going to get shredded, or what kind of tillage are you going to do, or how are you going to prep? Take that cover crop, process it. What you need to do to get ready for your next crop? What activities are you going to have?
Okay. Good question. This will go. Let's just say it's tomatoes, okay? Because I'm going to spend time on rice, so you don't have to hear something twice. So on this one, we will be doing so on tomatoes, that crop the vetch crop you saw, that's the same, that's right there. That's also there. Okay, so he's running through and he's chopping, okay? And then we will run something to incorporate that biomass, okay? And it'll also this happens to be a clean cover crop, because I didn't want to put up one of my old dirty cover crops that actually it's good, it's beneficial, but we have a bunch of fields that have a lot of mustard and radish and stuff in it, which it's good, but it's not intended, but now I'm getting a little smarter, I'm seeing it's a good deal. But so anyway, this one just happens to be of just vetch. And but whatever it is, even if we've got bluegrass and other grasses growing in it, this is our first operation. Our next operation is to get as much soil to biomass contact to expedite the breakdown, because we want this digested by the soil before we go plant, just because of what I just talked about, that if you come in and the material's still breaking down, the microbial life is busy breaking it down instead of providing nutrients for the plant. So depending on the weather pattern, like let's say this was last year, okay, so we're waiting and we're sizing up how much equipment we got, how much ground we got to cover. And so like March 1st, let's say there's a rain coming, a big rain, no ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, so and we've got enough equipment, and we're going, we can get across all the ground in a week. So like February 20th, we start in running the chopper, okay, because we don't want to miss a beat. That rain might come the 1st of March, another one the 7th, another one the 15th. We start panicking. We can't get that time break in. So we'll hit this. This operation will be tied to when we're supposed to plant to the weather pattern, okay? And if we have to get in, let's say February 15th, they're talking about 1 month rain event, okay? We would come in February 10th and work this instead of going, oh no, we can wait. We don't want to risk. We don't want that 2006 experience. So like this was last year, and I spend about a half an hour a day studying weather, okay? I'm a total weather nerd. But this is one thing that can solve a lot of your problems, that beat the problems before it happens. So I'm not saying I'm a good meteorologist, but it's not a hell of a lot to say you are a good meteorologist. It's like, they're not that good. But anyway, so we'll do this op, and then we'll do whatever fits how how much biomass, and we'll incorporate it the least we can, but we will incorporate it. We will get that soil to biomass contact, and then we roll it. Okay, and that's all that it'll be hit, and we'll leave it until it's time to be planting. And the day before we're supposed to plant, by moving that dirt, we've brought up a bunch of new weed seeds. Okay, so if we're going to plant on a Tuesday, on Monday we'll come in and we'll lightly scratch it to take out that wave of weeds. We'll roll it down again, holding the moisture. We'll come in, stick the transplants in, and just leave the field alone. Then it'll go 30-some days or whatever, and when the plants are up or we start seeing a few weeds, we run actually something from Germany called cultivators. I highly recommend them. They are unbelievably effective, and they run right in the row, and they're these flex fingers, so they take out every weed. So hopefully there's no equipment salesman here that's trying to sell a $140,000 in-row cultivator. Good, because you can spend $2,000 on this finger weeder, and not only that, you're not running at 2 miles an hour, you're running at 4, and as weird as it seems, so these fingers are flexing and coming right through the row of the tomatoes. We run them on everything we can run them on except for melons. And the melons are growing too prostrate, and it's kind of doesn't get under it. But so you can run through there, clean up all the weeds right in the row, and then you're thinking, God, the plants are going to be all beat up. Brian, do the plants look better the next day? It's like they like it. They like having that. When I'm doing this, my fingers are crossing. The plant's right in the middle of that. It's getting hit, yes. A KULT. Yeah, they're finger weeders. They cost, approximately $1,000 a row. And sometimes we'll run them twice. In other words, they can run on plants that are bigger. I don't know if that's illegal, if I'm supposed to be saying things about product or.
Have we censored much yet?
Okay, all right. So anyway, that's where I'm at. And then we've reached the point now, it's 30-some, 40-some days out, whatever it fits. And one of the reasons we're holding off the water so long is, one, we want to let the plants grow. We don't think they need to be babysat. And we also don't want to encourage them that, water's already right here, why develop more of a root system? So, but if we can lay off and just let them go, the other advantage is just simple economics of weeds. If we wet the bed, you're organic, no herbicide, hello, here come the weeds, and so you've got that hoeing bill. Yes?
Are you furrow irrigating and not drip?
No, yeah, I am furrow irrigating, and I have done drip. In fact, I was doing drip conventionally back in the 90s, and I've done drip 5 times since I've been organic, and that would be another whole hour. Long story short is that one, we have water. Okay, we're not the San Joaquin. Okay, but also we don't use much more water than drip anyway, because like I was saying yesterday, on a 125-day tomato growing season, we're not irrigating the first 40. We're cutting the water 30 to 45 days on the other end. So we're going hard with water right in the middle of the season, and that's it as it is. We definitely drip uses less, but it's not like, whoa, twice as much or anything like that. We're probably like 25% more than drip is. Okay, but the main reason that we don't use drip is that we try and keep everything as simple as we can, but more so when you go out and spend a couple $1,000s an acre on putting a drip system in your field, you no longer are the farmer. The drip system's now the farmer, because the drip system's going, for me to get paid, for you to pay for me, you're going to have to grow high-value crops every year. And I'm going, I want to go from tomatoes to wheat. I can't pencil wheat we're growing wheat with 0 irrigations. Okay, now you got a drip system here, so you're going through 1 year where it's not paying its way, or you're not getting a high-value crop off of it. And the other side of it, why I'm not for drip, is we're putting all this energy into getting wheat life. We want, all the bed is available to provide nutrients, and it's available way down. I mean, there's a lot of our growing season that it's dry, the top 12 inches. And yet, like that 65-ton crop I showed you yesterday, that was dry in the top 12 inches almost the whole season. But it still was able to produce it. We got goodies a long ways down and all the way wide. So, and we're still single row, right. And the drip wetting pattern, for those of you who aren't in the drip world, they call it an onion, okay? So basically, I mean, it'll go wider, but basically it goes out like 8-10 inches, and then it'll taper down, and then it'll drop straight down. That's sort of a normal. So why spend all this effort to get your ground in really nice condition and not use it? And then you have a problem come up, and so your plants aren't growing so well because they're not getting all the nutrients you should. So then, instead of spending no money on fertilizer, you need a last name of Zuckerberg to afford running liquid nitrogen through the drip system to make your crop at $8 or $8.50 a unit. You got to put on, say, 30 units to get a kicker. You're at $250 an acre extra just because you put a drip system in instead of doing your furrow irrigation. So yeah, no, I need to say I am a little get excited about, but it's frustrating to. I'd like to use it, and we keep trying it. It's one of those things that's almost an ego thing. God, if these other guys can do it, I can do it. But we found that, so we've done comparisons side by side, or we've done just field against the field, and 10 ton to the acre less drip than the furrow. And the last time we put it in, Brian and I were so impatient, halfway through the season, we were doing a test. We were really busy. Tomatoes looked like hell. Screw it. We just started furrow irrigating with a drip. We just said this doesn't fit. It doesn't fit our way of farming. Forget it.
Are you farming on dead level basins?
They're sloped. Yeah, on the rice, they're all our ground is sloped. When we're in irrigation systems, for the most part, that started the Sacramento River, and then one field from then on, it's gravity through like 10,000 acres. And so, like, my field sits higher than the neighbor's field, and the top of my field is low, and it just matches on through. So we.
So you never have to put like a GPS leveling piece.
Yeah, no, we do. We do.
And so at that when you end up having to do that, do you have to beat the dirt up anymore as far as?
It's pretty beat up. No, you did it. Yeah, no. On that point, what we have seen over time is we would do stuff the way everyone does it. We would take a crop off, and maybe if it's residue, we chopped it, and then we disc it twice, and then you rip it twice, and then you go in and you triplane it, or you run your GPS leveling. Then you come back in and you pull your beds, and then you go roll. Well, we've almost skipped all of those. Like we will chop the residue, and I'll show you like a corn wheat planting, and then we'll before we chop. Or after we chop, we'll spread compost. So we make one pass to mix the compost with the residue, okay? And that's it. We're done. Sometimes we'll go in and I'll show you the tomatoes. We'll rip the furrows, okay? Because the furrows are getting really beat up. But other than that, like without planning, again, so. I mean, it sounds like we're just flying by the seat of our pants, but it's only because we're flying by the seat of our pants. It's like, but as time goes on, you just realize, well, wait a second. Hey, we haven't triplaned this field for 2 years. So what? Everything's fine. But eventually, on that thought, sometimes you're running equipment that drags dirt to the end, so eventually you start getting high points, and you do need at least to go around the perimeters and knock and bring them true, so your drainage is good if leaving the field. Compost. So this is valid, especially for those of you who haven't been the pleasure of being in the tomato business, processing tomatoes. So this is what a field looks like after it's harvested. On the GPS aspect, the driver is still, in fact, I skipped. Well, that's okay. We're on this one. We'll stay on it. Then I'll come back. Note, so here's furrows, right? Here's my 5-foot bed that we try to not disturb for what we can. But look at what happens when you harvest tomatoes. You know, you're seeing these piles, all this biomass, and well, once you harvest, it's nothing there to speak of. I mean, maybe there's at best 2 tons of biomass. So what do you do? How do you get from here to your next crop? So first thing again, so we're not doing extra passes, but we don't want to leave compost. If you're going to put it on, it's got to be incorporated from my perspective, or you're going to lose it. So the first thing we do is we put on the compost, and then we're going to run something to mix it in so we don't lose it to the air. But this is one of the problems of California farming: no-till, don't touch the soil. Okay, here's the furrow. This is our controlled traffic. All our passes is here. But look on top of the bed. Okay, that's major compaction, and that's coming from the tomato trailers. Okay, we've got a set of duals. So what are you going to do about that? You know, I mean, that's serious pressing down. And so what we're trending toward is that by us running a ripper in here, and by a ripper, you know, it's going in, it's got a point, and we'll be going in 20 inches, okay? And we'll be, and just lifting, and that lifting action, somebody give me a lesson in running these things. That lifting action will shatter this too, and hopefully that's a knot. And if we're uncomfortable, we'll do more ripping than that, but for the most part, it's the same thing. We're just finding we're making less. We don't need to do all that heavy tillage anymore. It's just gone by the wayside. Any other questions? So he's running on controlled traffic, and this would be a field probably going into corn. So going back, I skipped a whole lot. Man. Okay. We never hit crop rotation. I'll run through this fast, but any questions, I love them. So just an idea. So what do you do? What's your crop rotation? You know, why are you doing what you're doing? So this is white winter wheat, and so this is like ready for harvest. So we'll harvest it, then we'll chop it, then we'll incorporate it into the soil, and this actually goes back about 3-4 years ago that we came in and planted black eyes, and I just say it goes back 3 or 4 years ago. We would have a lot more biomass on top now. Okay, we're still learning how much we can get away with on what we leave on top. So, but you can see there's still a lot of wheat straw there, and so then from there we let the black eyes grow out, and it'll either get killed by a frost, or if it hasn't, like we'll just go plant. We'll go plant a vetch crop or a cover crop right on top of the black eyes, and let them grow all through the winter. Okay, then we'll go from there, and we'll come in just what I showed you, that scene, and we were talking about chopping it, and then we'll be back into the tomato mode. If we get the tomatoes harvested early enough, from there we'll go like last year. This is the first year we did this. This was actually following a field of lentils, but the same concept. If you get the crop off in July, get something in the ground. Get it growing, you know, as soon as you can. Sometimes we're so busy we have a hard time getting in there the day after. It might be 2 weeks after, but 2 weeks after is better than not at all. And so this was planted in the middle of July. This is, anyone know what this is? Yeah, right, yeah. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of hemp in California here very soon. So I'm practicing, all right? I'm practicing here with sun hemp. And so this is, to us, this was heaven. This thing grew this much in 45 days. It was like the shovel there is like 5.5 feet. You know, it's getting up to 7 feet tall. We pre-irrigated, we took the crop off, we pre-irrigated, we never cultivated, it just shaded things out. We did one irrigation, and that was it. And I think we could have got away with no irrigation, but it's the same thing. This is the first year we've done sun hemp, you know, a year on the safe side. Like next year we grow some, we won't. And we actually put out test plots. We did some at 15 pounds, some at 30, some at 60, and we found the 15 pound. I mean, it's super economical. It's like $15 an acre for the benefits. And here you're getting the best of both worlds, because you're getting all the above growth for the biomass, and it'll still nodulate. So you're still getting an end kicker. Yes? July 15th. No. And Right. From what I understand, that it's like you can't, in our latitude, you can't get it to set seed because it's so tropical. So it's just what you're seeing is exactly fits. That the later it is, it doesn't get the heat units or the daylight hours, and so it just doesn't perform as well.
It is a tropical warm season like you.
Okay.
We're not growing in my environment.
How tall do you get, Gabe?
It'll only get about 2 feet.
Oh, okay, I got something on you.
It's your unfair advantage.
So yeah, crop residue. The only value of this picture is I showed you that one earlier, right, of rice straw that we had beds, right, and you don't see quite the biomass. So that's fitting tomatoes. But if we don't have to do that, well, you shouldn't do it. So like this is just going to be getting planted to beans next year because, again, I talked about the rice and getting the difficulty of the next crop to grow. So we chopped it after the rice, and then we just planting the vetch and just letting it go, and we'll worry about it next spring. Why go in? I mean, honestly, if we went in there to try to not have all this rice biomass clean coming into the winter, probably 10 passes. I mean, rice is so tough, and it's the lignous, and you just beat it, and you're not getting anywhere. So it's better, I give. This is what Mother Nature's doing. Don't fight, go with the flow. So more on crop residue. This picture shading out all the multi-species crops I have under there. No, there's nothing under there, Gabe. But there will be, okay? So, but anyway, I mean, I've become such an enthusiast of biomass and putting stuff in the ground and getting it, helping out the soil that I enjoy, walking through corn that's 12 to 15 feet tall. The farmer's looking at, how big's the corn cob and how many rows do I have? I'm going, wow, okay, this is great. So we'll take this, we'll chop it after harvest, and then like this picture was taken about 2 weeks ago. We chop it, we spread the compost, and we cover the compost, so that's the first time any action's hitting on the bed and mixing, and then we just come in and drill the wheat. So we are doing tillage, but it's pretty minimal for what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing I like to point out is that there's no steering on the controlled traffic, right? As you can see, that guy, I'm not sure, I think I was doing a dance like that about 40 years ago as he's cruising along, and also for those of you who aren't dealing in GPS, you think that would be really easy for the driver to fall asleep. It is really easy for the driver to fall asleep. And so there's a beeper system on the GPS. It knows when the end of the row is coming so the guy doesn't drive into a canal, and it gives a beep so he wakes up, and then he does his turn, he pulls back in, the AB line says you're right, you're green, you're on the money, and he takes off again. So this is this is really valuable also, the GPS and the controlled traffic on if you're doing tillage and you're fighting weeds, or I think even in no-till you're going to be fighting weeds, that we find that we can cultivate so much closer with the GPS and the tracking and the accuracy. In fact, we put, for those of you who are tech nuts, we also have GPS on our 3-point on the tractor, because a lot of times your sled will want to cattywampus. You're going this way, this is your AB line, you're running fine, and you think the tractor's fine, but one of the sleds, one shovel is a hair low or one knife's a hair high. There's a little torquing action, so the sled starts running a little sideways. So we have GPS on our on the sleds also. It's called AccuTrack, and what it does, it has the AB line that the tractor has, so it's bringing it back to true. It's got like 2 rams on the 3-point that are going like this, just keeping it on a true, that sub 1 inch line. And conserving inputs, this might be my favorite picture. This goes back a couple years, but it captures all the stuff that we think our farm is doing right. First of all, like the plants we have 6,800 to 7,000 plants per row, and it's on a single row, okay? Most tomatoes are planted 9,000 plants, okay? And they're on 2 rows, So, and the cost, the way it's going on labor, like we're saving just being able to plant like this, we're probably saving $350 an acre. Okay, so that's one thing. So that's the plant thing. The nitrogen compost was put on in the fall the year before, like the pictures I showed of them spreading. And that's it. The only other thing we put on is microbials and seaweed at planting, and that's the inputs for the tomato crop for the season. There's nothing. We don't do anything else. So that's the nitrogen side, the plant side, the water side. This field, actually, we had a really dry pattern before this was planted. This was 2015. This was still in the drought. January, February, and March, it did not rain, very little. Like maybe we got 2-3 inches. I mean, it was dry. We planted this April 1st. Still hadn't added no water. This still hasn't been irrigated. This is up to 40 days after planting through 3 dry months plus a month of growing. So we've got a long stretch, and the color of the plants is still good. Okay, so our water, usage of water is also excellent. And then the conservation tillage, yeah, we've worked the ground, yeah, you can see, but overall for California farms, for the mix of all that's going on, we've still got a lot of biomass. We haven't churned the ground to death where it's just that perfect brown. Let's see, what am I time-wise? Wow. So I've got 11 minutes. Jesus, do I carry on or what? So I can get into why I don't think California is moving forward on knowledge economics or psychological, or I can spend time on rice planting, our different way.
Unfortunately, Scott, I think we're at our time right now. I don't know, maybe the thing's reading wrong.
It said 49.
We're at 10:30.
That's it.
Yeah.
God.
Sorry about that.
Man.
I know, you're just getting started. Let's give Scott a great round of applause, please.